Good morning. Children, you are dismissed to your classes. Isn't Jesus wonderful? So, I hope you're ready to take notes. Last week, we started a study on Revelation's 7 letters, and we have to lay some groundwork. So we went through several parts of the construction of Revelation, and I gave you several examples of how the Holy Spirit had John put this together. And this is all important pieces because these are all important pieces. If we really want to wrap our minds around these letters, because these letters are also part of Revelation, and they follow the rules of Revelation, so we have to wrap our minds around how it's constructed. Understand that each of the 7 letters were sent with a copy. So chapter 1, which is a bit of a preamble, along with the copy of their letter, and then the rest of Revelation, 4 through 22, went to each of these locations. This is not uncommon. They were encouraged to share their letters, and Paul does this with his epistles on time. So they all got to see each other's letters and what was important. Because it wasn't just important to them, it was important to each other, every congregation, to keep an eye out for these things. So as we move forward, always, we take the Bible seriously. I don't say literally, even though that's what many want me to say, because it can actually be dangerous if you take it literally at times. Exaggeration was a form of Hebrew humor. And so there are things that are not meant to be taken literally. We have figures of speech. We all learned about them in school. Similes, metaphors, hyperbole, analogies, personification, alliteration, irony. There are over 200 types of figure of speech in the Bible, and many more. Some of those you're like, I don't even know what those are. I don't blame you. The Bible uses these to great effect, but as such, you have to be careful taking things too literally. What the Bible records is exactly what happened, exactly what was said. Now, in some cases, science claims it can be proven wrong, but they either already have or they will come around with new discoveries to find out the Bible's right. We've seen that the Bible also contains types, many of these types. And when we talk about types, we mean a foreshadowing, a prophetic image, usually of Jesus. These can also be of the Holy Spirit. You can have types of salvation. You can have types of events. There are different ways to put these together. We usually focus on types of Christ, people and things that represent him before he was born. Foreshadows of his coming, of his plans, his eventual sacrifice. We have this with Abraham and Isaac, for instance. When the father Abraham is willing to sacrifice his son Isaac. Do you know that Abraham asked Isaac to upgrade his home computer? Isaac looked over the specs of the computer and said, "Forgive me, Father, but the system just doesn't have enough memory for what you want to do." And Abraham says, "Have faith, my son. God will provide the RAM." I know. So, but Abraham does say that God will provide himself a sacrifice. And we can take this 2 ways. Most see it as Abraham telling Isaac that the Lord has a lamb already picked out for sacrifice, also implying that Isaac is the sacrifice. And then we see the ram caught in the thicket, right? Right when the angel stops Abraham. But the sentence can go the other way, and it can be that God will provide himself as a sacrifice. It just depends on how you fill it in. Making a prophetic statement for the future, that Jesus would become the Lamb of God, the threshold sacrifice. Abraham was acquainted with the idea and the plan of the Messiah, as were the patriarchs. Many see Jesus as hidden in the Old Testament, but the idea was pretty well established in the Hebrew mind because they were looking for the Messiah the whole time. And it was actually more clear than we give credit for. Stephen even confirms in Acts 7:37 when he points out that Moses spoke of the Messiah in his talk. We see it in some of the oldest books. One of my favorite verses, Job 19:25. As for me, I know my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand on the earth in the last days. We don't think about this, but how can a man who's pre-Hebrew nation, who lives around the time Abraham, a little earlier, is talking about his Redeemer, the Messiah, that will stand on the earth, something we don't see happen until much later. So they already had this idea. We think of it as an exclusively New Testament concept. It's not. Not just the Messiah, but we're talking about the one who redeems, Jesus. The Bible's full of these types. Moses is another one. I have another long list of how he's type of Christ. How Charlton Heston was a type of, how Moses was a type of Christ. Joseph is another. I provided pages before of over 100 ways that Joseph and his Technicolor dream coat were a type of Christ. So it's not a new thing. It's throughout the text. One I promised I'd talk about last week was Joshua and Jericho. We know the story well. Joshua was leading the Israelites in the promised land. He was going around as the Lord led him and fighting to remove the people that Satan had set up as landmines for the Israelites. See, Satan knew that this land was their destiny. It was already proclaimed before all this. And so he had 430 years to pretty much get it ready for them, to stop them. He was always trying to stop God's plan because he was trying to stop the Messiah. So Joshua goes, he sees this city. Now it's a marvel of its time. It's considered the first city in history. They dated it 11,000 years, which is a bit of a problem for a biblical chronology when the earth's not that old. But it's the first walled city that we know of. It had more than 1,000 people living in pretty well-built homes for the time. They had walls that were about 20 inches thick. They were built into the first and second walls as well. There were homes built into the walls. One of the outer walls is where Rahab had her business, where she hid the Israelite spies, and where she hung the red cord. It's built into the wall, so you could see it. It was well guarded, well fortified. The king of the alliance of these nations, he was an alliance of these groups, of these cities, they knew about Joshua. They knew about the Hebrews because, as you see with Rahab, news of Egypt had spread. So had news of every other nation they'd taken down as they moved along. So these groups had formed an alliance. So the Israelites got these massive catapults and these siege engines, and they had some cave trolls, and I'm sorry, that's Lord of the Rings. They didn't siege the capital, though. That's not how the Israelites did things. They didn't stop up the water. They didn't use dead bodies over the walls. They didn't throw fire into the houses. There was no real way for the Israelites, as they were, to take this city. They weren't this big, massive marching army for this purpose, right? They were God's people. But their God is very mighty. Our God is very mighty. And when our God stands for us, who can stand against us, right? The plan is actually quite mad, if you think about it. The Levites, who were never to enter battle, as per the law, were in the battle around the walls of the city. The ark, which was never to see battle or be out of its place, was right up front, out in the middle, out in the open, marching around the city. They circled the city once a day for 6 days, during which time 7 priests, each with their own ram horn, blew their trumpets, and the French peas threw slushies at them. It was in the VeggieTales, I know it's true. The rest of the men were not allowed to shout or talk at all during this time. And then at the end, there was one loud trumpet blast, long trumpet blast on the 7th day, and all the men shouted, and the walls fell down flat. Joshua 6:5. Now, you can't really blame the French peas because you imagine this is a very odd group of people. They get to your fortress and they just go in circles. I mean, they'd been in the desert. We know about these people. It's kind of hard to miss. A million people walking in a big circle for 40 years. You kind of know about them. And now they get here and they're doing the same thing to your city. So, the sun obviously got to them. Now, in the course of 7 days, the Sabbath would have passed. And they're supposed to rest, right? But they don't. So they keep breaking rule after rule. Joshua told them to shout, the walls fell down. They excavated those walls. They found one of the walls was flat under the ground, as if it had been sheared off. Now, since then, archaeologists have said that this is a made-up story because we have the ruins and we changed the dates. So it's obviously not true. No, it's pretty much what they did. And they found relics that don't belong to the Israelites there. So obviously they weren't there. Can't make it up. So the Israelites rescue Rahab. They take Jericho. We all know the story. But what's amazing about it is how well it matches Revelation. See, we have the leader of the army, Joshua, which is a transliteration of the Hebrew name, Yeshua, or Yehoshua, which has been shortened to Yeshua, which is in the Greek, Iosos, which we render as Jesus. So the leaders have the same name. In Revelation, Jesus is returning with his armies. Joshua is technically the vice captain because he's actually following the orders of the angel of the Lord, the captain of the host, Jesus. So Jesus is leading both battles, no matter how you look at it, literally and figuratively. Joshua is taking back the land from the invaders for his people. When Jesus comes back with his armies, he takes back the land for his people from the invading armies. There was a confederacy of 10 Amorite nations, allied under one leader, one flag. The leader called himself Adonai-Zedek. It meant the Lord of righteousness. He was the king of Jerusalem at the time, before it was Jerusalem. He had 10 kingdoms under him, but 3 had already been beaten by the Israelites, the Midianites, Amalekites, Moabites. So he only had 7. In Revelation, the pseudo-Christ has 10 kings, 7 kingdoms. The Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Edomites actually escaped the Antichrist. Daniel 11. Anyway, so there's 7 trumpets carried by these priests, these 7 priests. In Revelation, we have 7 trumpets of judgment. The Israelites were told to be quiet until the final trump. In Revelation, there's silence in heaven for half an hour before the final trump. They march for 7 days. And of course, Revelation covers a 7-year period that we know, we call the Great Tribulation, even though it's really 3.5. But after Jericho, this confederacy is ultimately defeated at Beth Horon by hailstones with signs in the heavens of the sun and the moon. You have, as these are defeated, you see these hailstones fire. And the kings hide in caves and yell for the caves to collapse and crush them so that they don't have to face death. In Revelation, there are signs of the sun and the moon in heaven. And they are defeated with hailstones, fire, judgments. And the kings hide in caves and pray that the rocks will follow them so they don't have to face the coming Lord. These stories are very close when you look at them like this. The reason I'm going over these things, we need to grasp and appreciate as much as possible the reality that although we credit human authors for writing these books, no human actually did this. The level of organization is beyond mind-blowing. And the more we explore it, the more we see it. It's crucial to the understanding of Revelation, including the 7 letters. Again, we're dealing with 404 verses with over 800 allusions to the Old Testament. It's encoded so that the Jewish mind could make sense of the book and its visions. Even though the letters were sent to the church, includes both Jews and Gentiles. These things are inextricably linked and designed to be one message. So with that in mind, I want to move to Bible numerics. We went over some last week, but there are just so many. I want to share some more with you. These things can be weird to some people when you say it, simply because the devil has corrupted the things of God with the occult and different meanings. And so things that God designed as holy, things that point him as the creator, have been corrupted in a way that most Christians won't even touch. But Greek and Hebrew are very unique because they're the only languages that natively have their number and letter systems as the same. So each and every letter has a natural numeric value, as well as a value for the letter and the words and the writing. I think I have that slide back there, Hebrew. No, I may have messed that one up. Well, I had a slide for you, but it's not there. So, it's my fault. The Hebrew alphabet and the Greek alphabet, I'll put it on realm later. There's the letters with their values, and each letter is worth a certain number, okay? Because their letters were also their number systems. Now, these numbers have meaning in the Bible. We see a lot of numbers in the Bible, right? We see 7, that's a lot. We see 4, we see 10, we see 8, 50, 70, 2, 12, 6. They're repeated. They're numbers that are used over and over again. The number 7 means complete. Most people think of it as God's number, and it is in the sense that he is complete. But remember, the red dragon has 7 because he has total control. He has complete control. He's not God, but he has complete control over his armies. So in the Hebrew mind, 7 or 70 can actually refer to a complete set. And this happens in the Bible. 7 is referred to as a week of. We use this. We have a week of days. How many days are in a week? 7. They have a week of months. We call it a year, but it's 7 months. You can have a week of years, 7 years. And every time this happens, you have a Jubilee year on that last year. 70 can refer to a complete set. We see this when Deuteronomy, when the Lord divides the earth into 72 segments. It's also referred to as the 70 because it's the complete set. It's not like he lost 2. There's the number 6, which we think of as the devil's number, especially 666. It means incomplete. It's the number of man. Because God is complete, we're not. Without him, we can't be complete, so we're 6. Number 8 is important. More in the New Testament, but 8 is the number of resurrection, regeneration, new life, fresh start. Think about it. There are 8 people that left the ark, right? So we got a new start on the planet with 8 people. Jesus in Greek, as I mentioned, the name is Iosis. And if we take the letters and we add them up, that's them. If you add the letters up, they each have a value. 10, 8, 200, 70, 400, 200. And you add them up, that's 888. You think of 777 for God. And in Hebrew, Yehoshua is 777. But in Greek, it's 888. New beginning. So if you hear me say the value of those letters, or the value of those words, that's what I mean. Now the other thing is that the entire universe is run in a very systematic way. Okay? We know this. It has rules, very established rules. And this is how we know how things should act and respond, what variance we can expect for every action. There's an equal and opposite reaction, right? Why? Because it's all run on a system. Everything has order, which the Bible tells us. God put everything into order. So, of course, what do we see? Order. In spite of chaos, there's still order. That's how we know how to build a chair. Car. Why does your car act up? Something's out of order. This is how science is supposed to work, right? You theorize, you test that theory by attempting to prove it wrong. We usually can prove something right at least once due to natural entropy or outside interference or pure chance. But a scientific law cannot be proven wrong. So what you try to do is prove it wrong. The entire solar system runs on numbers and organizations. The Greeks knew this, the Babylonians knew this, the Phoenicians knew this, the Egyptians knew this. They all worked out calculations they built in accordance with the systems they discovered. You can blame those cultures for geometry, algebra, astronomy. In fact, at times, we find them using actually more complex math than we ever thought they should be able to. These are all wonderful little fingerprints of the Lord. Numerics and the Bible system work many ways. You have equidistant number systems, which means every so many letters, and it spells word. Or, and some people try to misuse that, or the hidden value of words and names, like I showed you. Or you have multiples in the writing. So you can actually see how things are built on numbers. 7 is the most often used number. We see a week as a set of 7. Their year is 7 months. Their jubilee is every 7 years. They have a major jubilee on the 50th year, which is the year following 7 sets of 7. Okay? How many times did Jesus say we should forgive somebody? 70 times 7. Why? Because the Israelites, every 7 years, were supposed to let the land rest on the 7th year. They continued to disobey him. 70 sets of this. Before he calls the Babylonians in to take over, it had been 490 years. 70 times 7. He had forgiven them for the same offense that many times. His answer there, when they say, how many times should we forgive somebody? He's like, until you've forgiven somebody 490 times for the same offense like I have, don't even ask me that question. In Egypt, we see 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, right? Every 7th day is the Sabbath. In Jericho, there were 7 priests carrying 7 horns. Last day, 7 times around. Solomon spent 7 years building the temple, and then he had a 7-day feast. Naaman washed in the river 7 times to cure his leprosy. Numbers are there over and over and over again. And the thing is, if the Holy Spirit puts a detail into the Bible, okay, if he tells you these details, there's a reason. There is no reason for most details. He could tell his story without any of them. But when he gives you specific information, there is a reason. So, we need to be familiar with this concept so that as we go into the letters, it's clear in your mind when you start seeing these things. There are surface 7s, like the ones I just mentioned, but there are some below the surface. For instance, there are 21 writers of the Old Testament mentioned in the New Testament, 3 times 7. There are 26 total writers with names. They're named, okay? 26 total named writers. And if you add the value of their names, like we did with Jesus, it ends up at 7,931, or 1,133 times 7. This continues throughout the Bible. The Bible is naturally divided into 7 segments: the law, the prophets, the writings, the gospels, the acts, the epistles, and Revelation. In fact, 7s occur so often that it is beyond the realm of possibility. It couldn't happen naturally, let alone with 40 authors over 1,500 years. How do you send a memo through time? I've never sent an email through time. You might be able to do that with Internet Explorer. But other than that, I don't know how you do it. This leads skeptics to think that this has to be put together and faked. And this works until you see the chances of this happening. So if we look at the first set of sevens. Now, when you do multiples, okay, you multiply the numbers together. So sets of 2, 7. The chances of anything happening once in a set of 7 is 1 out of 7. Now, for 2 of these to occur, it's 7 times 7, 49. For 3, 343. You follow? 7 times 7 times 7. So for 9, it's 1 in 40,353,607. Next slide. So to get 21, for instance. Now that's a really big number, just so we're clear. I mean, that's beyond, we're already well beyond most people's appreciation for numbers. The final one. Now for 34, I'm going to tell you that there are way more than 34 sevens hidden in the Bible. I mean, a lot more. We hear numbers so often, especially in America. We don't think much of it, right? We have movies that make $1 billion. That's a lot of money. Like, that's a crazy amount of money. But we are so used to hearing millions, billions, trillions from the government or from corporations or for whatever. We don't think about it. We're so used to them, they don't mean anything anymore. But we deal with astronomical numbers all the time. Based on the median income for American families, the median income, $67,520. I wish. That's supposed to be the median income for a family. Now, $67,500, let's just round. If you could save every bit of that, so somehow every year you have $67,500 you don't need. You just don't need it, okay? So you save it up. You just don't need it. You would need 14,810 years to save $1 billion. Now, I don't know about you. Some people are quite old, but I've never met anyone that old. Just saying. That's really old. Now, 1,000 times that is $1 trillion. So at that rate, it would take you 14,810,000 years to save up $1 billion. If you could save almost 70 grand a year. Is that not nuts? If you could save $100 a day, $700 a week, which is most people's paycheck, or more in some cases, for 10 million days, that's all it would take. Then you'd have $1 billion. That sounds more manageable. Until you realize that 10 million days is 27,397 years. It's a little tougher. Let's say you could put $100,000 a year into savings. So you have $100,000 every year you don't need. If so, call me and think about adopting me. No. But if you could save $100,000 a year and you didn't need it, it would still take you 10,000 years to hit $1 billion. And that's just $1 billion. We just sent 16 trillion. So we have heard these numbers so much, we've lost appreciation for how much money we're talking about. So when we say the odds of winning the Mega Millions lottery is 1 in 292 million, this is a very large number. I'm going to give you a list of 10 things that you have a better chance of than winning that lottery. Being crushed by a meteorite. You have a better chance of becoming a billionaire the regular way. You have a better chance of becoming a canonized saint. which you only need 3 miracles for that. And I can think of 2 in my life, and I got a couple of really good card tricks, so I think I can nail this. You have a better chance of dating a supermodel. You have a better chance of paying off your student loans in full. You have a better chance of dying from being left-handed while using a right-handed tool. These are all real stats, okay? These are all like real numbers. You have a better chance of being struck by lightning, which we've all heard, but actually it's being struck by lightning while underwater in a submarine than you do of winning this lottery. You have a better chance of becoming president. And we know how hard that is now. You have a better chance of going to the ER with a pogo stick related injury. I don't even know what that would be. You actually have a better chance of becoming a Bitcoin millionaire than winning this lottery. And they're not worth anything now, So when we talk about the odds of something, these numbers are huge. So when we say 1 in 2, that's a 50% chance, right? 1 in 2, okay? So a coin flip, we always go with a coin flip, right? 1 in 2, it's not really 50-50. It's more like 51-49. But 1 in 2. So if I had 2 coins, I'll flip them both, and I need them both to be heads. What are the odds? 1 in 4. 1 in 2, 1 times 1 in 2. So 1 out of 4 chances. So if I flip them 4 times, I better get 2 heads. So if I have 10 coins, well, then the odds become 1 in 1,024. You'll be doing a lot of flipping. So we have 7s throughout the Bible. And as I showed you, it's really crazy, the odds of this happening. 7s that are overt could be written off. You could say, well, Jews know that 7's an important number. So, of course, they write 7s into everything. And that works until you do the hidden ones. I'm going to give you an assignment. Okay? So, here we go. This is your assignment. I need you to write a genealogy. Think you can do that? I know my mom can't. She's done it like 1 billion times. But I need you to write a genealogy of your family. You guys think you can do that? Who's with me? Nobody? All right. Let's just say you all are. Okay. It sounds easy, but I have rules for you to follow. 1, the total number of words that you use in this genealogy have to be divisible by 7. That's not too hard, right? You play with things, it's not too hard. You can figure that out, especially on a computer, because you got a word count. Okay, but the total number of letters used also has to be divisible by 7. That's a little trickier, but it can be done. Okay, the total number of vowels used also has to be divisible by 7. The total number of consonants has to be divisible by 7. Who's still willing to try? The total number of words that begin with a vowel have to be divisible by 7. The number of words that begin with a consonant, divisible by 7. The total number of words that appear more than once must be divisible by 7. Most people have bowed out, I think. The total number of words that appear in more than one form have to be divisible by 7. The total number of nouns, divisible by 7. Only 7 words can't be nouns. Total number of names you use, divisible by 7. Now it's really hard. Only 7 other kinds of nouns can be used. The total number of men in your genealogy has to be divisible by 7. total generations has to be divisible by 7. So that's 15 rules that you have to follow. You think you can do it? If we bring up that list of 7s and we see where 15 is, the chance of you doing this is 1 in, that's a big number. 4,747,561,509,943. That's the chances of you pulling this off. If you could do 1 attempt every hour, nonstop, no breaks, no sleep, it would take you 197,815,062,915 days to pull this off by chance. Or 554,959,077 years if you have the time and you're bored. To give you an idea of how these statistics work, this is not just anyone's genealogy. This genealogy exists. This is the genealogy of Jesus, found in Matthew. So the chances of him pulling this off, when I say no human can do this, that's what I mean. The Bible is very well constructed. Lord Kelvin once said, "Until we can measure a thing, we really know very little about it." The Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek by 270 BC. So almost 300 years before Jesus is born, they had the scriptures in the common language. This is why he held them accountable, to know that he was going to show up and when and how, because it's all detailed. So can we trust that Jesus is who he says he is? Well, let's take a look. Let's look at 8 prophecies. We're going to pick 8, okay? Jesus being born in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2. This is prophecy that predicts Jesus will be born in Bethlehem, right? This is the first prophecy. There are no previously set restrictions on this. So what are the chances of one man in all of history being born in Bethlehem? You have to find out the average population of Bethlehem from the time Micah wrote this to the present, and divide it by the average population of Earth during the same time. According to the best stats, it's about 280,000. Since the probable population averaged less than 2 billion at that point, and the population of Bethlehem averaged 7,150, we can just go by those numbers and not include a much higher number by including all of history, and say 7,150 divided by 2 billion, or 2.8 times 10 to the 5th is your chance of being born in Bethlehem. All right, how about number 2? Having a forerunner that announces you. This is in Malachi 3:1. How many people in the entire world had a forerunner before they even started going around talking about them? I mean, obviously this is a special messenger. Somebody else already knows they're coming. I'm not talking like 20 minutes before they get there. I mean, before they even show up. Before you even know who they are, you're talking about this person. Let's be fair. Let's say 1 in 1,000. That's a lot of people that have forerunners, just saying. Especially out of the current 8 billion people on the planet. That's a lot of forerunners. Okay. How about riding a donkey? Number 3, Zechariah 9:9. How many men entering Jerusalem as a ruler showed up on a donkey? How many do you think? In all of history. This is a hard one to put an estimate on, to be fair. But after a certain point, nobody rides donkeys. They would have ridden a horse. So, you know what? Let's be fair. Make it real easy. 1 out of 100. In a room of 100 people, at least one of them have presented themselves as king on a donkey in Jerusalem. Okay? We know that's not true, but let's do that. All right? Number 4. Betrayed by a friend that causes wounds in his hands. Zechariah 13:6. Christ was betrayed by Judas, one of his disciples, caused him to be put to death, resulting in wounds in his hands. How many in the world over? What are the chances of one man betrayed by a friend, and that betrayal results in wounds in their hands? I think we can agree it's pretty rare, right? So 1 in 1,000. And yes, I'm purposely going very low. How about being betrayed for 30 pieces of silver? Zechariah 11:12. Question is very simple. Of all the people who have ever been betrayed, how many of them were betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave? Probably more than we think. But let's say 1 in 1,000. So somewhere in your life you've met one. How about Zechariah 11:13? Silver being thrown back and then used to buy a field. See, Judas, after he realized what he'd done, took the money, rejected it, right? He took it, threw it back in the temple, and said, I have betrayed innocent blood. Well, they said, we can't put this into the collections because it's blood money. So they bought a field. Now, Zechariah details this back in 11:13. He talks about the money being, his price being agreed on, being paid that money, the money being thrown back and ending up in the hands of a potter. Because guess who owned the field? A potter. What they could do with the money was they could pay for like a pre-anticipated, that's redundant, an anticipated expense. So if somebody comes into town, okay, back then, and they die, and they're from out of town, they have no family, no money, it actually falls on them at the temple to bury the person. You know that? It was a cultural thing. They had to bury him. So they bought this field. They had fields for this purpose. This is something they could do with the money. So, this is very expensive. It's also very specific. Sorry. So, how many times has this happened? I'd say probably never. But for our purposes, let's say 1 in 100,000. Okay? Number 7. How many people have been falsely accused and made no defense when facing the death penalty? How many people do you think? How many people do you think, falsely accused, facing death penalty, make no defense for themselves? Never say they're innocent, never say they don't deserve it, like everyone in prison. How many in history? Probably very rare. Let's say 1 in 1,000. Lastly, crucified. Psalms 22:16. Crucified. How many people, since David wrote that, until the 4th century AD, had been crucified? Because that's when it started. Crucifixion was extremely common for Rome, but unknown to David. He lived about 1000 BC. They didn't start this until 6 BC. So thousands of people could have been crucified on any given day in the empire. In fact, we have records of up to 5,000 being crucified a day. Okay. It was an extremely common form of punishment for anyone who wasn't Roman. And the whole point was, don't betray the empire, or this is what will happen. Crosses lined the roads going into and out of towns in the Roman Empire with people on them, obviously. So, how many people do you think in that window, 6th century BC to when they stopped, would be crucified? Let's say 1 in 10,000. Because remember, it's only the Roman Empire. Right? So if these estimates are fair, what do you think the chances are of one person doing all 8? Well, we're going to have to put those numbers together. So 1 in 2.8 in 10 to the 5th times 10 to the 3rd times 10 to the 2nd times 10 to the 3rd times 10 to the 5th times 10 to the 3rd times 10 to the 4th gives you 1 in 2.8 times 10 to the 28th, as in 28 zeros. That's a lot of zeros. The billion we talked about is only 9 zeros. Okay? So 28 zeros. You write that out, which I did. That's 28 zeros. So what are the chances that any man who has lived from the days of the prophecy to the present time have fulfilled all 8? Well, we have to account for how many people have lived on the planet, which estimates say is 88 billion. So 8.8 times 10 to the 10th. And when you combine those, you have to take 10 to the 28th divided by 10. We'll make it 10 to the 11th, make it easy. And it makes it 10 to the 17th. Okay? 10 to the 17th. To put this into perspective, we have to do an equivalent experiment. 10 to the 17th. All right. We're going to take silver dollars. Okay? We're going to take silver dollars. 10 to the 17th silver dollars. That's a lot of silver dollars. They probably never made that many. But let's say they did, and we have them. We're those people who can put $100,000 away a year. And we have 10 to the 17th silver dollars. Now I'm going to mark one of the silver dollars. One. Okay? This many silver dollars, I'm going to make 2-foot stacks. Silver dollars. Right? This many would cover the state of Texas. That's how many we're talking about. I'm going to mark one. I'm going to blindfold you, and I'm going to tell you get one shot to find that silver dollar. Do you think you can do it? No. Let's say, instead of 8 prophecies, 16 prophecies. Well then, we have to take the same amount. So we had a set of 8, which was 10 to the 28th. So we'll add another set. That makes it 10 to the 56th, divided by the population. That is 10 to the 45th. Now, how big of an area do we need for these silver dollars? Do you know the distance between the earth and the sun? 30 times that. It would be a ball of silver dollars, 30 times the distance from the earth to the sun. One of them's marked. You're blindfolded. Take a guess. Do you think you could do it? No. I'm going to give you one more. 48. Let's do 48 prophecies. Remember, Jesus fulfilled 300 prophecies. So to do 48, we have to increase it. Now, I'm going to make it easier. I'm going to lower the number. So instead of 10 to the 28th, we're going to go 10 to the 21st. 6 times, which gives us 10 to the 168th, divided by the population, and it's 10 to the 157th. So 10 with 157 zeros after it. I did not write that down. It did not even come up. Silver dollars don't work. To give you an idea how big this is, silver dollars don't work because they're too big. We have to use something that will work for our math. We have to go all the way down to electrons. Not atoms, electrons. And we have to, let me give you an idea. Electrons are very small, right? They circle the atom, okay? If we wanted to make a line of electrons that were 1 inch long, just 1 inch, okay? There would be 2.5 to 10 to the 15th electrons in there. If you could count them, and you could count 250 electrons per minute, it would take you 19 million years to count that many electrons. 19 million years to count the electrons in 1 inch. Okay? We are nowhere near the number we just listed. So if we take 1 in 10 to the 157th, so 10 and 1 to the 157th electrons, we mark one, we mix it up, and you get to pick it. The distance from our galaxy to the next closest, Andromeda, is 2.5 million light years. So it is how far light would travel in 2.5 million years. So if you had 200 million US citizens, and each one had a library, okay? They each had a library of 65,000 books. Could you imagine having a library of 56,000 books? You'd never be bored. And you took all of them, 65,000 from 200 million people. You took all those books, and every mile you put one letter from the book. One letter. So at mile 1, the word's the. So at mile 1, T. Mile 2, H. Mile 3, E. Okay? One letter every mile. You'd run out of books and wouldn't be anywhere close to Andromeda. That's how far we're talking. Now, the estimates on how large the universe is varies greatly. Some said 6 billion. Some said 28 billion just last year. This year it's 93 billion. It's all over the place because we can't tell. We can't go that far. So we have to guess. Let's use the 6 billion. Keep it small, okay? So if the universe is 6 billion light years across, for the sake of argument, and we line up our electrons, have we reached the end? No. We've only used 10 to the 80th electrons. Only about half. In fact, if we made a solid ball of these electrons, we could extend the distance and go 6 billion light years, 10 to the 28th times. Jesus fulfilled 300 prophecies by himself. We can't deal with this number in practical terms. There's no way for me to tell you. We're already at the edge of the universe. There's no way for me to explain to you practically the odds of doing this. If we took all of those stats down to 1 in 4, 1 in 4, and we did all 300, there's still not enough room. We'd never run out. If you put them all. I still can't tell you. Even at that number, it's too big. Before we close, I have one last type to tell you. Abraham and Isaac. And we know about Abraham and Isaac, we talked about earlier, but it doesn't stop there. Isaac continues to unknowingly fill the role of a prophetic type. See, to Abraham, Isaac was dead when he agreed with the Lord to sacrifice him. How long was the journey? Genesis 22:4. On the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. 3 days. In Abraham's mind, he's already dead. He's already decided this, okay? He's going to lose his son. That's the end of it. So for 3 days, that's it. They trekked up the hills of Moriah to a place later called Gethsemane, where centuries later, another father would have his son sacrificed. After 3 days, the angel shows up and stops Abraham, and Abraham gets his son back. You could say he was brought back to life. So we have a bit of a type there. But if you keep reading, Abraham comes back down the mountain. Where's Isaac? You can take time, you can look. He's not mentioned. Isaac is raised back effectively, and then nothing. Abraham comes down. It doesn't say Isaac does. And he goes to his unnamed servant. And we know who the servant is. He's named earlier. It's Eliezer. If you know Abraham's story, you're well acquainted with Eliezer. But he's not mentioned here. He's not named. He's mentioned, but he's not named. He's an unnamed servant, making him a prophetic type of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit doesn't have a name, that's a title. And Jesus tells us, as we went over, that his entire purpose is to point to who? Jesus. His whole purpose is to serve Jesus, to bring people to Jesus, right? So the servant is told by the father, Abraham, to find a bride for the son. You can guess where I'm going. And he does. He finds this girl, Rachel, who's never met this Isaac person, doesn't know anything about her. And Rebecca, sorry. And doesn't know anything about her. Doesn't know anything about her, never met the man. Knows they're related somehow. But she knows this is the best deal. She knows this is who I'm supposed to marry. So she agrees. That sounds crazy in today's terms, right? Like, no, I got to meet the guy. But she knew God had made a way. God had planned this. So she's brought back to meet the son. And the first time they meet, she's on the horse. She's riding back, right? And she sees Isaac. Only time he's been mentioned since the mountain. He's been gone, waiting for his bride, making ready for her. And you don't see him again till the bride's brought. Just like us. Never having seen this person, she jumps off her horse and runs into his arms. How do you think you'll respond when you see Jesus? You've never seen him, but will you know it's him? Do you think you'll know Jesus when you see him? I think I will. I think we all will, right? We'll know exactly who he is when we see him. We've never seen him, but we're going to run to his arms one day. In the greatest reunion of our lives. So as they come forward to sing one last song, with all of this, all this is proof of who wrote this book. And these are just more examples of that organization. Okay. This is proof that what we're dealing with is a book that is not of our making. This is not a book like any other book in history. This is not a book like anything that's ever existed. This is not a fanciful fairy tale. All these books from all these authors, most of them not knowing each other in many cases, are able to write in a way that creates organization that will blow your mind. And I'm going to love going through it as we go through it. But the amount of organization, the chances, like you see here, it just can't happen. It proves what we believe is real. If you weren't sure already, what we believe is real. So, are you ready to meet him when he comes to get you? We don't know when that is, right? Could be any moment. Now? No. No. Worth a shot. Now? No. Somebody's going to be right? But it could be any moment. We're not guaranteed anything. We could meet him ahead of time. So we have to make sure that we're ready for that moment, that we live the way he wants, that we take the opportunities he provides for us, that we grow in the way he wants, and that we've given our lives to him, because we don't know. Yeah, you're young, maybe you'll live another 50 years, maybe you won't. The Lord may come back before then. You may not get to live your whole life. You don't know. Let's stand and sing one more.